Now, sometimes people will say, well, how long does it take to get advice? Well, this will sound like a real lawyer answer, but it depends. But here's why it depends. If you were to call us and ask a question that we have addressed already in writing, it might be as quick as a phone call for us to say, oh, that's a great question. We actually just addressed that 2 years ago, mirroring circumstances. Get in our website, print off this advisory opinion, follow the advice in that opinion, you're golden. So it could be a 5-minute phone call. If it's something a little more unprecedented or groundbreaking, it takes a little more research and review, et cetera. But again, I would say take advantage of that resource. Why not? It's an opportunity for you to protect yourself and your city and to get that safeguard in place. Now, obviously, when we respond to those, we are relying on the fact that the facts and circumstances presented to us were accurate. If that is proven not to be correct, then that obviously removes that safeguard. But in general, that's what we'd say, take advantage of that. Anytime you feel potential conflict coming into your city council, into your offices, et cetera. Questions so far on conflicts? I'll be happy to repeat any questions for the camera as well. Do you have any questions so far? Have I lost anybody? No, you're all thinking to yourself, yeah, but you might want to consider decaf, Susan, right? I get that sometimes, I know, yeah, at this time of night. Okay, here's the other section of the law that I'd really like to touch on here tonight, and this is the issue of public contracts, okay? Public contracts, just so you know, are any time public money is spent. Anytime. It could be a $4 million capital campaign contract, we're gonna build something new, or it could be that your office manager reimbursed a staff member from the petty cash because they bought some toner for the office equipment, okay? Anytime public money is spent, that's a contract, that's okay, but here's what we should know about contracts. Someone give me an example, just holler out to me. Someone give me an example of a type of service or good that your city purchased from a private sector vendor, somebody in the last year.
Designed for a splash pad.
Okay, designed for a splash pad. I don't know what that is, but I love the way it sounds already.
Yeah, instead of swimming, you go in and
Oh, okay. Okay, so we want to get somebody to come in and design this splash pad for us. All right, so here's the issue under public contracts. You know that you need to purchase this. You want a contract outfit. Somebody's going to design it. You're going to take bids, et cetera. And you think to yourself, this is probably far shooting, I know, but you think to yourself, you know, my sister just happens to own a swimming splash pad design company. I didn't know they existed, but that's kind of cool, okay? So you think my sister owns just such a company. Is my sister allowed to submit a bid to the city to be considered for that contract? Yes or no? Yes, as long as what? Not only you don't vote on it, you don't do what else? Discuss it, lobby, email, recommend, hint. Do what? Okay, don't turn anybody into me right here, right now, okay? Yeah, okay, or push a meeting, or try to influence that outcome. It really does need to be, I'm stepping back from it altogether, okay? Now, let's say you worked for the company part-time, that you do design work for a company like that. Could your boss, who owns that company, submit the bid? Potentially, yes, as long as you're able to stay away, you're not going to implement. Now, though, in the third scenario, let's say you own the company. Can you submit your bid, stay out of the decision-making process, and potentially be a vendor to the city that you serve?
I don't think so.
No. Here's where the ethics law would say no, that for all of us in public service, now, to be fair, there are some exceptions there. Truthfully, you know when these exceptions come into play more often, honestly, is in very rural areas of Ohio, where you may not have as many vendors to choose from. Seriously, I mean, it wouldn't be fair. Like, actually, where I grew up, part of my childhood, as I mentioned, I'm originally from the Cleveland area, but part of my childhood was spent in kind of a farm. My parents, city kids, had this vision of being farmers. Don't do that to your kids. It's just a bad thing to take it from the city. Anyway, okay, so we grew up in this very rural part of Ohio. We had a township trustee who had the contract to do snow removal in that township. And you know what? I believe they met all the criteria. They could do it fairly. They're going to give them a good price. And there's nobody else in the vicinity who's going to do it for a reasonable price. Everybody else will be coming from 50 miles away. I think you can all assume where you live, there are other vendors available to do the work that your city needs done. So in general, I would ask you to assume, if in fact you own your own business in your private life, I would ask you just to assume that the city you serve is never going to be one of your clients at your private business. Does that kind of just make it easy as a nutshell? Okay. Then here's the last thing under contract, and then I can touch a little more on the gift thing, because I did promise I'd touch on that. Here's the last thing under contracting I want to touch on, and that is, I heard somebody actually reading their fact sheet earlier, the issue of nepotism. This is an area, this is kind of a timely topic, especially this time of year. This becomes an issue, it seems, a lot in the spring and summer, which I understand. I don't know what your individual budget situations are in your cities, but I recognize that a lot of cities do summer hires, whether it's lifeguards, parks and rec programs. I recognize that. So let me ask you this. Is nepotism, is the crime of nepotism someone in your family who gets a job with your city? Is that the crime of nepotism? No. What's the crime of nepotism? There you go. You were part of the process to influence who got the job. That's nepotism. Because you know why it's nepotism? Because a public job, whether it's full-time, part-time, intermittent, summer, whatever, a public job is public money spent. And what did we say about every time public money is spent? It's a public contract. It's a public contract. And if someone in our family is involved, as you said, it's hands off. So if someone in your family wants to apply for a job at your city, an adjacent city, the county, the state, wish them well. Hey, I'll be thinking about you. Good luck at that interview. Love you. But beyond that, we stay a million miles away from that process. Do you know there was a city manager? I won't tell you again. I don't want to put any particular community on the hot seat. So there was a community here in Ohio that this... You're all like, we know this one already, but I won't say the city. All right, there was a city manager who had an opening, maybe you'll recognize the story, had an opening on her staff. She advertised on their website, and she got about 120, give or take, electronic resumes through her website for that. She chose the 10 she was going to interview, she interviewed them, and she hired somebody to come work for her. Anyone want to take a guess who she hired? Her husband. Now, let's say that your loved one, your child or your spouse had also applied for that job and came in number 2. How comfortable are you that process was completely objective? That total coincidence that the most qualified person in the whole planet for this job happened to be the person who eats dinner with her every night across the kitchen table. What a coinkydink, right? I believe that the topic of nepotism, this area of the law, is one of the easiest to understand. And here's why that's important. One, because it's a 4th-degree felony. But secondly, because it's easy to understand, the public understands it. I grant you, there are areas of the ethics law, some of our advisory opinions that even I, who've been working for the Ethics Commission for a while now, that I have to think, okay, what did I just read? You know, we did an advisory opinion in November about if the federal government gives stimulus funds to a city and the city then turns around and gives it to a community development corporation to help distribute it fairly, how does the ethics law play into all those different players there? That's one that I admit you're going to go, whew, I need to read that more than once to make sure I understand. Somebody hiring their kid to come work for them, the public gets that one real quickly. And in my mind, it's one of the greatest violators then of public trust. That's when the public starts to say, what do they say? They're all crooks, right? And all of a sudden, all of us in public service are branded with that unfair title, even though we know it's not true. We know it's not true. Remember when I said there's about 700,000 public servants in the state of Ohio? Do you know how many last year in 2009 we had open, active, ongoing investigations on? 168. 168. Now, are there people getting away with things we don't know about? Of course. But couldn't you say that about any line of work? Still, though, of those that we knew about and had to investigate, 168 out of almost 750,000, I still think it's a pretty good testimony to public service at every level of government in Ohio. But nonetheless, it takes one person like that to hire my husband to come work in my office, knowing the public's going to see that, to make people question the fairness, the integrity of the entire government in place there. It's just not worth it. And here's the other point that's not worth it too. If someone is convicted of the crime of nepotism, not only can they be charged with a felony, if you're convicted of that, the loved one that you hired, their job's terminated anyway. Because the law doesn't say, if someone enters into a public contract illegally, the law doesn't say that contract is voidable. The law says it's voided. Boom, it's done. So not only am I in trouble, my husband who I hired is out of a job anyway. So it's just not worth it. So here's what I'd say to you, especially as summertime approaches and kids and grandkids and siblings are looking for summer jobs, here's what I'd recommend. We have on our website a fact sheet that specifically talks about nepotism, summer hire, the definition of family. This is not mandatory. This is not required. It's totally up to you. But I think it's a great idea. I do a press release on it every spring saying, hey, FYI, everybody, this bulletin's out there. It's just a helpful fact sheet. It's the cliff notes of nepotism of the ethics law.